So we'll start with a working definition of what personal growth is. And like you have heard by now, I'm like a big champion for it. And while I enter into, I thought I should just share a little bit about my story, how I came around to personal growth, why I haven't pursued law strictly as a career, even though full time I do have a job working in legal advisory on two projects under an institution under the German government called the German Development Corporation in Zambia. But I do want to spend the rest of my life doing personal development. So how did we get here? Yeah. Right? So briefly, growing up, I struggled a lot, not even growing up. I grew up quite a loved child. So coming out of my own home in the safety of the love of my parents, I moved into high school. For the first time I went to boarding school, I must have been in 10th grade. I don't know what that is in Kenya or Dubai and the other communities represented here. But in 10th grade, I went to a boarding school. And it was the first time that I experienced bullying, or the first time someone ever pointed out to me that, I did get it when I was young, but now that I was a teenager, I was becoming aware of myself. I was starting to get crushes on boys. So suddenly it became important what people said to me. It was pointed out to me that my skin tone was a little darker than others, that I had a big forehead, that I was short, or my teeth were funny. And all those things started to get to me and how I showed up in society to people, and I became very insecure. And then top that off, after a year or two being in boarding school, I don't know if it was the water or it was just hormones, I had this bout of pimples. I just had acne from hell, to say the least. So this carried on into my university life. So I carried this insecurity with me. Getting into university, I started feeling very unworthy of love from the extroverted person I used to be as a child. I became very introverted. But while at university, I did meet a boy who was crazy about me. I didn't understand what that was. It was relatively new to me because of how I was feeling. I did have people approach me, but also because, remember, I didn't say this, I was raised Christian. So I came from a very strict home. We couldn't date until we were out of school. So now I was finally out of school, and now we're in university, and there's this guy, he's already working, and it's a fancy job. He works in a bank, and he's just crazy about me. So we start to date, and he sort of became a clutch for me, and I sort of found my validation, and a lot of my validation in that relationship. So while in university, again, remember, I have told you I'm already working through a lot of insecurity that I have carried from high school. And then I have this boy in my life, and it's going great. But even there in university, I start to experience some failure. I think I failed a course. I had to go on part-time. So that compounded already on the insecurity that I was struggling with. So I finally finished university, get into bar exams. Now, if you're familiar with the Bar Association of Zambia, it is hectic. And I failed there multiple times, and that kept compounding. This is important because I want you to remember that we're talking about stock taking tonight. So this is compounding, and every layer is adding on top of the other, right? So while I'm at school now taking my bar exams to finally become a practicing lawyer, and we're just about to get into mid-years. Now, let me explain mid-years a little bit. So mid-years, when we're at the Bar Institute, we used to, in my time, we took a total of 11 courses, and we were supposed to write these courses in 1 week. Now, it's a continuous assessment. How many courses you pass in this assessment determine how many points you will make for the final. And then I learned on the Friday, and exams were starting on a Monday, that love of my life had just cheated on me. Another layer is added to my insecurity. And then everything that I had thought of myself, maybe I'm not beautiful, maybe I'm not worthy of love, maybe because I am dark skinned and I have a funny dental formula and my forehead is big, everything that had been said became validated in those moments. And Miraculously, I did manage to pass the bare minimum of courses in that exam that would allow me to move to the next stage in my final and allow me to write the full course. Long story short, I struggled a lot in that school uh, to finally pass and get on the other side. A lot of my friends went 5 years ahead of me, and it was very devastating for me because now I hadn't just struggled with all these things compounding. My friends had gone ahead of me, and at this point, I'm already introverted. I'm not keen on making new friends, so it became very, very lonely. Uh, that said, another thing that was happening in the background while all of this is happening was the fact that I had started my journey on personal growth to when I had one course in my university, no, in my Bar Institute exams. And I had started to listen to a lot of personal growth content. I had started to watch Super Soul by Oprah Winfrey. I was reading every personal growth book that I would find. Because I was feeling like I was getting depressed and I was struggling with a lot of anxiety, I had found mentors who to speak to. I was at church like crazy. I was serving like crazy. All this time, everything is happening, everything is going crazy. I was also sort of grasping at straws and trying to stay afloat. And something that was very, very clear about my struggle in that time was the fact that I always felt like, Bupe, you come from a home where you are loved, your parents dote on you, you're provided for, you're not going hungry, you have an excellent education, to be fair. And honestly, you don't have a right to feel the way you're feeling. And so a lot of the time I showed up to the world like I was okay, but inside I had this personal struggle that I had, which is a weakness unique to me, in that for every struggle I've always experienced, I hide behind the mask of gratitude. I'm like, oh, look, this is working out for you. Therefore, you don't have a right to feel that way. So while gratitude is a great thing, I really used it to mask a lot of the pain that I had experienced. So like I'm saying, simultaneously things are happening where I am trying to deal with the confusion that I have privately. I'm not talking to anyone really. I'm trying to read. I'm trying to do all these things to get out of the slum. So two major events, a lot of things happened, but I'm going to use, for purposes of our discussion today, I'm going to use two things that happened, right, that were impactful for me. So after that relationship failed, I wrote those exams, 11 courses in 1 week. And immediately after that, I fell sick. I felt really, really sick. And I assume it's because I had decided to suppress the emotions of the breakup, focus on school. But then that was the compounding problem, because now I had a lot of stress in my body and I was sick. I was giving malaria symptoms. I can't tell you how many jabs and tests were done on me to try and find what the problem was really, and they couldn't find anything. So one time we walk into the doctor's office with my mom and my dad, and they're all worried because now, like I had told you, my stress was coming out of my pimples. It was worse. I had lost weight. I was an adult who was in, like, I don't know, weighing 32 kilos. And as you can see, I'm already not a big person. So to be weighing now 30 kilos heading to the 20s, it became a worry. When I ate, I threw up. So we're sitting in the doctor's office, and the doctor asks my parents to step out so he could talk to me. And he sits and he says, Bupe, we've done everything for you. Do you want to tell me what's going on with you? And I did want to explain to the doctor, but for some reason, I just couldn't. I couldn't explain that I was going through a lot, and I didn't think that, I had the right to go through it, because so many things were going good anyway. So I couldn't say it. And now I'm just crying because I just want to get out of this slump. So next they call my parents back into the doctor's office, and they say to my mom, you will have to take her into therapy. And they suggested, at the time, it's a place called Chainama. It's a mental health hospital, which, before this mental health education blew up, there was a lot of discrimination around it because, the derogatory word of if you have a mental health issue, then you are crazy, right? Quote unquote. And so I got scared and I'm like, does it really have to get to this? So on the way home, my mom is like, Bupe, there's nothing we can do now. We have to take you there. And I think it was in that moment on our way home that I resolved I wasn't going to die for another human being. So there was one side of it where it was just pride, like I won't be the girl who went crazy because a guy cheated. And on the other side, it was just, Bupe, you are stronger than this. So because of the discrimination around therapy, I said I have to find a way. That's how I became intentional about reading. I was very intentional about reading the personal growth books that I had talked to you about earlier. I watched everything I could find on healing. I watched literally everything I could grab. And I can't tell you how many books I read in that time. Now, the only solution I have for people when they have a problem is, hey, read this book. That's how addicted I became to personal growth. And that's sort of the background where I am coming from with this personal growth. Thankfully, I did end up passing my bar exams. And even if my friends did go ahead of me 5 years, 6 years for some, God was so good to me in that soon after my job, I worked 1 year. It's like, you know how the Bible says, he restores the years the locusts have eaten. My pay grades increased to almost, for some, I earned even a little more than them, even though they had been in a working system a long time. And again, I credit that to personal growth because of all the lessons that I had learned, the soft skills I had developed. It put me ahead of some of my friends and brought me to the same level with some of my friends. So I did pass my bar exams, which was great. Met a wonderful guy. Now we're married. Next month we'll be celebrating 4 years. So I swear by personal growth to change lives, to help you through Islam. And that's where I'm coming from with personal growth. So that said, what is personal growth, right? So for me, personal growth is basically, even from my story, you may have picked up by now, it's just the process of acquiring skills, abilities, developing habits, attitudes, reactions, and things that can help your life be impacted in a positive way. All right, that's what personal growth means to me, like taking personal account of your own life and the things that you can do and learn that will put you either ahead of the others because you won't learn it in school. It's taking personal accountability for your own growth. There's a quote that I like. I think I've heard it again said by Oprah Winfrey about we are spiritual beings having a human experience as opposed to be human beings having a spiritual experience. Usually in the Christian circle, or even a lot of religious circles, whether it's Islam, Hindu, or Buddhism, we all have a belief in God and how there is an eternity after life. So we tend to be in the human space waiting for an eternity. And there's a counter argument that talks about, yes, it's true, there is eternity, and that's great, but our bodies are just anchoring our spirits, which will continue on in eternity. So having this perspective in mind, we are trying to grow while this body, that is our human body, decays, while it ages and eventually dies. There's still a spirit man that needs to be growing, that needs to be nurtured, and it is the strength of that spiritual man that supports this weak frame that is our human body. And that was that about what personal growth is. And then we go into why personal growth. And I promise you, I haven't forgotten about we're talking about stock taking, and we will get to it. Why personal growth? Does anyone remember what we learned in physics about Newton's first law of motion? Just so that I know some people are still here with me, since I have talked a lot in the last few minutes. Does anyone remember what Newton's first law of motion was in physics? It's a bit of a stretch, I know. Does anyone remember? Sorry, I'm not able to see if there are hands. Please go ahead and unmute yourself if you can speak. Does any, even no is an answer.
Yes.
Does
Let
anyone
me try.
remember?
Okay, let me
Yes.
try.
Thank you, Princess Fabi.
Uh,
Please go ahead.
every object to remain at rest or in uniform motion in a straight line unless compelled to change. I think so.
Powerful. Yes, that's absolutely right. So Newton's first law of motion, and yes, it's right. You want to also say it in, is it exactly what Princess Barbie said about first Newton's first law of motion? Exactly the same. Perfect. Yes. So Newton's first law of motion, and they're so powerful. I love it. Please go back and look at them after this session, the laws of motion, and see how you can apply to your life, right? Remember, when we're doing physics, we're always thinking about the objects. But when you think about Newton's law of motion and why personal growth, remember that it is a law of motion and not a law of the object. It's the law of motion. So whether it's acting on a table or on a car or on a human being, the law of motion still applies. So it says that when an object is at rest, it will remain at rest, right? Or if it is in motion, the object will remain in motion, right? Until an external force, and it remain in motion if it's on a straight line, until an external force comes comes to act on it, right? And when I was preparing, I was thinking we focus in this community very much on mental health, and I wanted to lock that in with our personal growth very, very much. So when you think of an object at rest, let's think of someone who has experienced grief. Naturally, what happens is when you have experienced grief, there's a sense in which there are moments when we experience, I remember what Dr. Kadochi says, we freeze, right? We have, in difficult situations, there's the flight, fight or freeze. But usually when you have experienced grief, there's a certain sense in which we withdraw, right? And then our grief locks us in. And in that sense, we become the object that is at rest, right? And remember that I talked about the spirit man and the physical man. So physical man has all these emotions that we're experiencing, and physical man is responding to the grief that they have experienced. And then because of this great loss, and from my story, perhaps it would be what happened to me after, I'm getting into exam, the person who you think is the love of your life cheats on you. Then you're just like, I have no reason to live. Perhaps I'm not worthy. And then, you shut down because there's a lot happening that you honestly don't know how to process until an external object, who is the doctor, came and said, well, you will need to talk to someone. And because that seemed like a threat, that external force that came to act on my situation forced me to come out of that. Now, someone can be in motion, right? So I could have, let's say, for instance, after I've gotten cheated on and I had failed that sport, I've said, you know what, there's a lot that is happening in my life. I can't handle it, right? Perhaps what I'm going to do is abuse alcohol, try and suppress those emotions rather than address them and deal with them, which could have led, to addiction, which we know sometimes has led to suicide. I have relatives who struggle with addiction because of emotions that remain undealt with. So personal growth is more than our success. It's about self-awareness. It's about healing parts that are broken. It's about having an external force act on an object that is still. Another example of when we are the object that are still is when I've heard people say, I just feel stuck in life. I am not satisfied at my job. I feel like I'm not growing spiritually. I just feel stuck. That is a sign of an object, or a human being in the sense of an object that is at rest. You are the object that is at rest, but don't want to be at rest, because naturally, the way we were created, human beings are designed for growth. And then it talks about being in motion, right? So you can be in motion in two different ways, in a positive way or in a negative way. So taking an example from my story, right? I could have been in motion, like I had talked about, spiraling away instead of taking control of my situation in life, perhaps abusing drugs and alcohol. That could have been the motion. Or I was in motion in a different direction, where after an external force acted on my situation, I was like, okay, you know, what are we going to do now? I need to change my life. I started to act. I was in motion in a straight line, reading, growing, and trying to make a difference in my life. So, since we have some great physics students, what was Newton's second law of motion? Does anyone remember? Do you want to have another take at Newton's second law of motion? Anyone, please feel free. Like I said, no is also an answer. I do not remember. I hated physics. Don't care much about that. That's an answer too. Newton's second law, and you can also Google. You know, I'm not there to stop you.
No, I personally hated physics. It was my first subject I dropped out.
You and I,
Forgive me.
anything that had to, no worries. Anything with formulas, numbers, that wasn't a thing for me. I too was like, no, thanks, sir. I'm not doing that.
Yes. So even thinking of Googling it, it's heavy.
It's
for
just
me.
like, no thanks. It's traumatic. Oh, it was, Barbara. Acceleration depends on force and mass of something. Yes, it's very, very correct. And I promise you, I don't science, not my thing, but yes, that's very true. Two things depend on acceleration. So we've come from the first law of motion that tells us that yes, we've done the first law of motion. Now we're in the second law of motion, and there are two variables that are very important. It's the mass and the force of something, right? So remember that I had told you from my story that I had been sick for a long time. For over a month, I was in and out of hospital. I had been jabbed on so much, I could not feel my arms right here where I'm demonstrating, because I had been poked on so much. I don't know how many times my urine was taken, my stool was taken, my blood was taken, measurements were done, but that wasn't enough, right? Until someone threatened me with, we are taking you to a place that was sort of at the time discriminated against because of what the perception of it would be. And I just said, I'm not going to die because of another man. But remember, the mass, right? It talks about it, the acceleration, the movement, whether it's positive or negative. Two variables affect the movement of the object. And in this conversation, the object is you and me, we are the people who are the object that this motion is acting on. So now the mass, in this case, will be represented by the weight that holds us down. And like I said, I have not forgotten, we're talking about stock taking. So we have the mass, whatever the situation that you're going through, the mass is what would determine how heavy what we're carrying is going to determine how quickly we move, and also the force with which it will be applied onto this object for me to move. So if I'm accelerating a car, for instance, at 10 kilometers per hour, I hate numbers, but just let's pretend that's the correct measurement, 10 kilometers per hour. That's exactly how it will move, because that's the force that is applied to it. If it's 20, that's the motion it will move at as well. So those two variables are very important: the mass that weighs it down, and the force that comes to push that as well. So there are a lot of things that go into personal growth: the state of our minds, external factors that are happening around us, and the internal factors that are going on the inside of that. And then finally, we have come to the reason of our conversation. it is stock taking. Has a readers community, which I like to refer to as the reading tribe. And in that reading tribe, we've just come through doing our first quarter reflection, looking back on what did we do right, what did we do wrong, what do we plan to do going forward, and celebrating our wins. So the reading tribe is centered around, it's more of a book club. We pick up, there's a book every month that we read, and then we have continual assessment on the different aspects of our lives. We've looked at limiting beliefs, we've looked at the SWOTs, looking at the strengths, weaknesses that we have. We've looked at goal setting, where we're going, how to plan. So this is essential because personal growth is an ongoing process. So today I picked specifically stock taking because we can't move forward without knowing where we're at. And similar to what we did in our reading tribe is what we'll do here similarly today, right? Take stock, reflecting, owning where we are, and moving on courageously. So 3 months of the year have gone by, and we are in the fourth. Now, I picked stock taking because in Africa, something that is very common, I hear, I've only been 3 other countries in Africa, so I'm familiar with this part of Africa. Very common, we have what we call kantembas or kiosks in other parts of Africa as well. I've heard of this. These are just small shops, and regularly you would find the owners of these shops doing something called stock taking. But also we have now big chains like ShopRite and Pick and Pay, again, which are common in the southern part of Africa, like South Africa, South Africa, Zambia. I'm not sure about Zimbabwe, but Tanzania. We have all these stores, chain stores, where people go and do their home shopping. And something that they do is stock taking. Stock taking is just accounting for what we have and what we don't have. And if they go into, the owner of the stores go in, or whatever system they use to stock take, if they go and find that there's something that is rotting, they won't keep it just because it's there. What do? They throw it out. But something human beings don't do is take stock of our own lives, right? Project Me is a project that a lot of people live on autopilot. We just leave our lives to happen in a way that, like I said, it's an autopilot. We just let life happen automatically. We are born, our education is paid for, you go to nursery school, kindergarten, whatnot, grade 1, you finish high school, you finish university, and then you have a job, and then you're like, okay, now what? A lot of people get stuck. They don't know what to do because we haven't gotten we don't have that system to take stock of where we are and also where we want to go. A lot of chain stores don't only take stock for purposes of knowing where they are, but they're taking stock to see if the targets they have set have been met, or if they will meet the targets that they have set. Come the beginning of the year, a lot of people set goals. They know this is where they are going to go, but they don't have a system for checking how far they've come or if they will get to where they desire to go. When worst case scenario, a lot of people don't even know where they want to go. And that's why stock taking is such an important process, because, when we look at things like anxiety and stress, a lot of these things, like I had said, which is why I'm very passionate about personal growth, can be dealt with in this process. I don't recommend my process because it was a longer process. Now there's therapy. Now there's, information that is available to us. So do take the shortcut. But at the time when I went through what I went through, there's a lot of discrimination around, mental health. And this is when there's a lot of awareness coming to it. And so when you have the opportunity, do take it. But I took the long route and it works effectively as well. So I'm passionate about personal growth because I feel like a lot of mental health problems would be reduced if people took account of of their own lives as well. We are stressed in work because we don't know how to manage our time. We are stressed in our jobs, in our relationships, because we don't have the tools to help us manage those relationships. We don't know how to set boundaries. We don't know that we can set boundaries and it's okay. We will still be loved. So that is why personal growth is so important. And that is why I'm so passionate about it. So under the Mindpreneur platform, we work around 5 pillars that we feel like if I got these 5 pillars right, I would relatively have a holistic approach to my success and I could be happy. And these 5 pillars are the mind, the body, the spirit, our relationships, and our finances. Our mind, our body, our spirit, our finances, and our relationships. So we believe that, success does not mean one thing to everyone. Success does not mean you are Bill Gates rich. You could be Mother Teresa simple, even though there's a lot of arguments about she had a lot of money, but just get the difference that success looks different on everyone. For someone, it's serving. For someone, it's being at home as a housewife, raising children. For yet another person, it's about owning a big business, and having loads of money. We all have different definitions of success. But for whatever definition of success that you have, you need relationships to be functioning well. You need your finances to be okay. Whether it's little or a lot, you need finances to eat and to stay alive. You need to take care of your spiritual health, because inner man, outer man, like we talked about, and your body, it needs to be in shape, and your mind too. So when we come to this stage of stock taking, the question is, and it's really going to be at this stage a question you will have to answer, because I'm not coming here to save the situation. And I don't know where I have found each and every one of us in our journeys, right? But the question is, where are you? How clear are you in your life? 3 months have gone into the year. We're in month 4. Did you set goals for yourself beginning this year? Did you reflect on those goals? Where are you? And it's not about saying, I want to earn 1 million kwacha. That's great, or dollars, whichever currency that represented here. The question is, okay, that's a beautiful big picture. Or I want to get married. That's nice. It's noble. It's beautiful. But what are the small steps you are doing to get there? So for instance, let's take the 5 pillars. That's what I'll work with to sort of help us take stock without imposing too much of a process on you, right? With the Mindpreneur, for instance, when you pick the body, right, we're talking about, is there a balance between your rest, your nutrition, your exercise, and your hydration, right? Because ultimately, the truth is, the real wealth you have is your health. No matter how hard you work to earn a lot of money, to gain wealth, whatever it is that you do, ultimately, if you kill yourself trying to do that, you live a shorter life. And what will be the purpose of the wealth you have achieved? So are you resting? Are you eating well? And one of the major limiting beliefs that comes from when you didn't have money and then now you come into some money is people eat carelessly, because you know what, I never had this. I used to admire this when I didn't have, so now I'll eat what I want. And then now you eat your way to the grave. So when we talk about the body, we talk about the balance of ensuring that you're having enough movement to help you along in life through exercise, simple things like walking at home. If you can afford, sign up for a gym membership. That is taking stock of one major pillar of your life. And hydrating, you need water for your creativity, for your body to function well, for you to stay focused. That is so important. Rest as well, because burnout is very, very, very real. So under the body, one takeaway is to remember that your true wealth really lies in your health. The fact that you can take care of yourself long enough to enjoy what you are working on. And also, if you have children, you don't want to die early and leave them behind. So that's about the body. And when we talk about the spirit, I'm not sure how many religions we have represented here. I'm Christian, and I strongly believe in getting into community with people who you believe the same things with, and talking about what you believe, ensuring that you are growing, being accountable to those people, um, to those people with whom you are growing with in that spiritual community, practicing your own personal growth. I don't know what your relationship is, where you're coming from, whether if it's in the Christian sense, it's a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Are you having your own personal devotion where you are growing and you're not only depending on what the preacher says from the pulpit? And these days we see a lot of heresy. There's a lot of scamming that is going around. So there's a sense in which you have to cultivate your own relationship, because from the fullness of your heart, your life overflows. And the feeding of the spirit man, your belief system, strengthening your belief systems, getting rid of limiting belief systems, that's where the overflow comes from. And that's how you show up in the world. And then the mind, right? Are you practicing mindfulness? What is the conversation that goes on in your mind? What are the things that you are saying to yourself? What are the books you are reading? And that's why with the Mindpreneur platform, the reading tribe, we focus on reading because we're trying to keep attention on the right thing. Because I think it's the Buddhists who talk about a mind that is not controlled is like a drunk monkey. Now, a monkey is already a chaotic animal. Now I can't imagine it's drunk, but that's how the mind is. It just goes in different directions when you don't take control of it. So what are you reading? Are you aware of the conversations that are going on in your mind? And if you are you acting? What are you doing to act on those conversations? Are they building you, or are they putting you, like we talked about, in motion in a straight line, in a negative way? So it's about being aware of the conversations in your mind. And what are the things that influence the conversations in your mind? We talked about, for instance, what are you reading? What movies are you watching? There are a lot of things that people are listening to in music, watching on TV, that has them addicted to things like pornography, that has them depressed. You're always watching crime things. It's making you paranoid. It's about balance. What are you watching on social media? What content are you consuming? Are you only always looking at gossip? What is it doing to the conversation in your mind? And pay attention to how it is showing up in your life as well. And something that I learned the time I read Atomic Habits, which I encourage everyone to read, is keeping track of your habits. But also, perhaps if you're just getting started on personal growth, take stock of how you're spending your day, right? Say, just take a notebook, say, woke up at 8 hours today. If you watched a movie, watch a movie, pay attention. I was on social media. And when you're on social media, pay attention. What did you see? What made you laugh? What made you happy in that day? What are you grateful for in that day? And then when you do this for like a month, you will see a pattern of what your interests are, the places that might need improvement, and where you can change. That's about the mind. And then about finances, we can't run away from it. Finances are very important. Like we have said, we wouldn't be having this meeting if we couldn't afford the internet or a smartphone. The reason why we're having this conversation today is because money has acted as the catalyst to help us do this. The question is, how important is money in your life? What is your perception of money? What will you do to get it? I deliberately talked about the values we have as the Mindpreneur platform, and one of them that we have is integrity. And when it comes to money, integrity is a very key aspect, because there are people who will not take care of their body, in that they will do anything for money to the point where it will kill them. They will lie, kill, murder for money. And again, it ties back into your mind. If you do illegal things, how are you going to have peace of mind? So integrity still comes into the money situation and the mind. So basic principles of money under the platform that we talk about, it's about how do you get money, how do you keep money, and most importantly, how do you grow money? Because now we are young and energetic and here talking about these things, but the time is coming when, if we do not set the right systems and processes in place to facilitate for our older years this money won't be available. So we don't want again to live the prime time of our lives only to be depressed. So how do you increase your income? Are you budgeting? Are you saving? Are you investing? Where are you investing? What are your gifts? Are you aware of those things, and how can you utilize them? And finally, relationships, right? So there are a lot of people again who will who will do anything to get the last pillar, which is money, where you neglect the people you love, you don't spend time with your friends, you always expect people to reach out to you first. Or the other extreme is you're the one who is always available to people. The question is, how do we set boundaries? How do we learn to love ourselves? How can we tap into self-care from our mindfulness and build relationships that are healthy and helpful? And also, how much are you reading on relationships? Like I said, a lot of the time, project me. And when I say project me, refer to yourself as well. Is, have you left your relationships or any of these pillars on autopilot? Are you living your body on autopilot, your mind on autopilot, your money on autopilot, your spirit on autopilot? Because remember that everything you do, it culminates, it layers. Just like for me, when I had told you that there were all these things that I had experienced from teenagehood that I didn't talk about, university life that I didn't talk about. And then one day, because my system couldn't accommodate it, it cracked. It came out in my body. It came out. I became sick and they couldn't find a problem. But we shouldn't wait until the worst has come to the worst. Take, take stock of where you are at. What for you as an individual are the most important parts of your life? Perhaps for you, it's just, I don't know, relationships or career development. Take stock. Where do you really want to be? If it's career, if you want to accelerate in your career. Remember, like I had said, anxiety, stress, a lot of these things that we struggle with. If we take care of our personal growth, especially in these 5 pillars that I have shared, even if you do struggle with stress, because you know where you're at in every pillar of your life, you know how to address the problem specifically. If it's your body that is not well, you know, oh, that's not an issue with my spirit. That's not an issue with my mind. Perhaps what I need to do is rest a bit more. And then you can save some money in medical expenses, whether it's therapy or, you know, or medical bills. And remember that a lot of disease that we struggle with cancers, a lot of them can be traced back to our personal growth. So that is all I had to share. Rosette, am I within my time or have I exceeded? Rosette, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You're very much on your
Okay,
time. You're very
perfect.
much on time. And I was so
Oh,
excited. I was
perfect.
so, I was trying to put notes, when we talk about not necessarily about stock taking, but when we look at the 5 pillars, rarely, I can't, I've never found myself adding relationships to that pillar, to the pillars. You understand? I know the mind, the body, the spirit, and then finances maybe, but not as a pillar, but it falls somewhere. But I didn't add relationship to it. So it is very good that you've highlighted that one. I'm 100% sure I have people in my team, the people who are thinking like me, or rather maybe I'm even better than some, or I'm worse than everyone. But I thank God you highlighted that, how important it is. Very important. It's very important because like for me personally, I think mostly I focus on the mind, body and spirit. No, I think I focus on all, but it is that it is just not having the knowledge that this one is also a pillar. You understand? So when taking talk, yes, not focusing on it as a pillar, but adding it somewhere, maybe adding it all around, so I'm sure some of us, many of us, because when I spoke about stock taking, I realized most people don't do stock taking, or rather maybe they do, but they didn't just understand what stock taking was all about. So if you are there and you have a question, you can put it on the chat box, or if you can unmute, just raise your hand and then we can give you some time for you to ask a question. Otherwise, thank you very much, Bupe. That was amazing. That was amazing. Okay, so okay, and then we have it. Zai says, what would you say to someone who is well into a career they randomly found themselves into? How does one navigate finding themselves, or probably finding out where they belong? And then how do they take 10 years of seemingly lost direction? I'm sure so many people are asking the same question. So I'll just read those questions again. What would you say to someone who is well into a career they randomly found themselves into? And how does one navigate finding themselves, or probably finding out where they belong? And then how do they take 10 years of seemingly lost direction?
That's powerful. Do you want me to take that right away?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I love that, because that's absolutely me. Yeah, and I always say we are more alike than we are different. So another short story was, straight out of high school, I was fortunate enough to find a job in a media company, and I was so happy because I was like, I have found my thing. This is what I want to do. Then I went to university, and everyone was like, how do you go? Not everyone. One particular friend said, how do you come to the University of Zambia and not get into law school? I said, yeah, okay, let's see. Maybe I'll do that. I passed, got into law school. It became the worst time of my life. Hated it completely. But here we are, still doing it now, right? It's not my passion. And I'd say I randomly found myself into it because, again, without having, made a decision on my own or followed my passion or whatnot, I didn't do that. So I ended up in this career. But I always say there are no wasted experiences. So when you take stock of the years that we have spent, like for instance, I'll share my process, right? When it became very clear to me when I was at Ziale, which was a school where we take by exams. When I was there, it became very clear that I didn't want to do this, but also I didn't know, did I want to go back into the school of mass communication and start over? Or what could I do with this that I already have? So I became intentional because I'm very passionate about giving. And one of the pillars that I have shared with you from the Mindpreneur platform is the fact that we believe in abundance, and it's about giving, right? Giving back to society. So I became very intentional about the type of work that I took. To this day, when I used to practice in the courts of law, I practiced in a way that was beneficial to other people. It wasn't just about, oh, am I a big shot lawyer sitting in a corner office? It was about, how can I find some fulfillment in the work that I am already doing? When we talk about stock taking, I know that there's a lot of advice now about follow your passion, pursue it, but sometimes we're not very clear what that passion looks like. So what I did was I explored a lot of my interests. And if there's something you always find me saying on my Facebook page, is the fact that I give myself permission to evolve. A lot of people believe that passion is this big esoteric thing that we'll find, and when we find it, we'll be happy doing it. But the truth is, passion is in the everyday. It's in how do I speak to you? Rosette, how do I treat people around me? That's part of passion, and work is an extension of that. And trying different things. Okay, so let's say, for instance, I found myself in the law, and I have different interests like media, taking advantage of the opportunities around. What are the passions that I have? And while I try to figure out where I want my final stop to be, what can I do in the meantime? So if 10 years has passed, we can't take back 10 years, right? What has happened. But in those years, a lot of character shaping has happened, whether it's positively and negatively. What have you picked up from those 10 years? What are the good things? What are the bad things? What skills have you built that you can apply on the other side? For instance, I'll give you an example. The study of law has helped me articulate issues better. I can advocate for people. Let me just move. I can advocate for people better because of the skills that I learned there. If there's an issue, I can point very specifically to what that issue is and how I would like that problem to be solved. Something that I didn't have if I hadn't studied the law, or even if I had done mass communication, I wouldn't have that. Another advantage of studying law in my country is that when you show up, people automatically assume that you are smart and they know exactly what you're talking about. Another thing that I can leverage when I walk into an office somewhere to ask about, this is my personal development plan for your employees. This is how I can help them and, move your company forward. Because I have become so good at arguing, I can sell things. That coupled with the personal growth I told you about in the beginning, where I read so many books. So negotiating, understanding human behavior, when you put those three things, it puts me at an advantage because of certain soft skills. So the 10 years are usually not wasted. There are a lot of skills that have been developed. What are those skills and how can we apply them moving forward? There's still a high potential that in the next few years, it won't become clear where exactly you want to be settled. So what can you take from those years that you have used, and what are the opportunities available to you that can help you move on your path? Like I have said, I'm currently working basically 2 full-time jobs plus doing social media and trying to get my social media presence grow. And that's one of the things that I'm saying, that's exactly who I am. I'm still trying to find my place within my passion without so much as letting go of the job immediately, because I still needed to sustain my life. So I'm still working. I've curated my work in such a way that it still speaks to one side of it, which is I believe in giving back. So it's funny because I'm a lawyer who's working in agriculture. Story for another day. But the point is, who are you as a person? Becoming self-aware. What are the things that you say you're passionate about? How can you use your current state to ensure that, it's serving you as a person? And what opportunities are available to you right now that you can tap into, that you can leverage, that will help you to move in the direction where you want to go? That's the formula that I am using right now because I'm exactly in that space. I always say I'm an accidental lawyer. I wasn't born for it. I think that's how I'd answer that.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm sure she got her answer. Sorry. Yeah, I'm sure she got her answer, and that was Idzai. Idzai.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure Idzai got her answer. Okay, so we do have a comment from Elizabeth, and Elizabeth says, "Thank you so much for this wonderful session. It gladdens my heart to know that we are not really alone when we face situations, but another person went through a similar and made the best out of it." Okay, and so Idzai says, "Thanks, I appreciate that." So she's the one who had asked the first question. So anyone else with a question? Our time is almost up. Yes, our time is almost up. We have, I think, 5 more minutes. Anyone else has a question?
And while we wait on the question, can I comment a bit on the relationships pillar?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So when you say a lot of people don't really look at relationships as a pillar, and this is because we're not very intentional about having good relationships, I see a lot on social media, people saying, oh, this person is backstabbing, people, what. And a lot of the time is because we don't see relationships as something we must bring work to. So for instance, in friendship, there isn't a lot of intentionality. We see people who get into relationship as a take situation and not a give. Whether it's a love relationship or a friendship relation, we go into jobs thinking because I have this qualification, therefore they must pay me. We forget that in life we are appreciated for the value we bring into a situation. So whether it's a married couple or a work situation, relationships are the pillars, is the pillar that keeps so the way we've done the 5 pillars at the Mindpreneur is that we look at it as a vehicle, right? The mind is the engine, the body is the body of the vehicle, finances are sort of the fuel, and the relationship are the systems that keep this vehicle moving forward. So whether that is a mentorship relationship, boss employee relationship, it has to be nurtured. How are you building skills to ensure that you have long lasting relationships? I think I have those relationships where I have like 15 years of friendship, you know. They are long because both parties are intentional. There are certain relationships where I've had to say, look, I'm not continuing in this relationship because we don't see eye to eye. Communication. So relationship is such a big pillar in our day-to-day life, because there's nowhere we can go without these relationships. No matter what we want to do, even me who is introverted, I have to work actively on relationship to ensure that, you know, they are good quality and they move me forward. So that's why I think relationships is such a big pillar